Good evening and welcome to the panel discussion on the first round of the presidential elections here in Colombia. My name is David Huey. I'm an independent consultant working on peace building and democracy issues in Bogota, and I'm moderating on behalf of Global Exchange in the panel tonight. I'm joined by Angela Rodriguez, Executive Director for the Netherlands Institute for Multi-Party Democracy, Gustavo Duncan, Professor of Political Science at the EAFIT University based in Medellin, and Laura Carlson, Americas Program based in Mexico City. Maybe we could start with you, Gustavo. For those in the audience who aren't familiar with Colombian politics, could you give us a quick overview of the four main candidates who were competing last night? Who are they and what political sectors do they represent?
Well, what happened yesterday was something new in the political history of Colombia, because this was a competence between different political forces. There were a candidate from the right, but Federico Gutierrez, but we can link here more than a political ideology to the political class of Colombia, the traditional political class and the establishment. He was defeated by Gustavo Petro, who was a former guerrilla member, and by Rodolfo Hernandez, who is more like a populist candidate. There was also Sergio Fajardo, who was part of the center. We can consider him like a moderate left ideology. But yesterday, the amazing thing, what awesome all of the analysis in Colombia is that two populists are now competing for the second round in the elections of Colombia. Gustavo Petro is more like a leftist, the typical leftist populist in the recent times in Latin America. And Rodolfo Hernandez is really quite different. It's a new thing. It's more like a hyper pragmatic candidate. We cannot consider him, even he is a right wing. If we take a look at his ideas, he's not that right wing. He's more like a center populist. He's a populist, not at all. And now what we have is a punishment from society to the political class and to the establishment. What the Colombians say yesterday is that we are tired of the political class, we are tired of the privilege of the establishment, and now we have something new. We want change. Now the issue is what type of change, what kind of change that Colombia are going to let in June in the second round. That's the big message of yesterday election.
Okay, thank you for that. I think we should probably go through the results so that our viewers know what happened, if they don't already. Gustavo Petro, of the Historical Pact Coalition, won the first round with 8.5 million votes. That's 40.3%. He was followed by Rodolfo Hernandez of the Anti-Corruption League with 5.9 million votes, 28.15%, then followed by Federico Gutierrez of the Team for Colombia coalition, just over 5 million votes, 23.9%. And Sergio Fajardo of the Center for Hope coalition at 888,585 votes, or 4.2%. So if we turn to you, Angela, what do you make of those results, and what do they mean for the second round?
Well, I think as every election, it has different meanings. The first one that we have to take into account is that a lot of people voted, and that's not something that usually happens in Colombia. We have been facing abstention and people being reluctant to vote for the past 20 years or something. So this is a really high number of voters that we had. The second one is that, as is evident now, the dream or the fantasy of Gustavo Petro to be able to win in the first round, which is extremely rare in Colombian politics, was not fulfilled. And it was not fulfilled by a competitor that I'm not that sure that he had in mind. Because during the whole campaign and even previously, the two prominent figures that we had in mind and that the media put in the center of the debates and themselves put them in the center of the debates were Gustavo Petro versus Federico Gutierrez. But now there was a surprise. And the thing that I would say that it's more clear out of the results is that people in Colombia want a change. Like, they don't believe and they don't trust and they don't want to elect the traditional politicians, because somehow Gustavo Petro represents that in some sense, specifically regarding the alliances that he has been making for gaining support during the elections. On one hand, he has recurred to some of the traditional politicians that have been jumping from different political parties, and that's something that people, I feel that they do not like that much. The second one is Uribismo, which is this huge amount of people following former President Uribe, and this is and I want to emphasize on this because I think it's like one of the main changes in politics in Colombia, and it's that Uribe and his followers, they don't elect president in Colombia anymore.
And why do you think that is?
And this is a huge rupture, and we saw that somehow this decline previously on the Congress elections. They've lost so many representatives in the Congress that it was really evident that they were losing strength, that they no longer catch people's feelings. And I think it also has to do with the way their political party has been behaving in the past. But I also think that it's extremely related to the way the current president, Iván Duque, is doing things and has been doing things for the past years. And this has become a really common phrase in Colombian streets. It's like, Iván Duque is the end of el Uribismo.
Right, so, okay.
That for me, that will be one of the main changes. And just to add one thing, and the fact that Fajardo, which represented the center, and somehow he could have gained all the support from the people that wanted to stop polarization, and he didn't manage to do it, also tells us a lot of things. People don't want to vote for those traditional politicians, because at the end he has been running for the president for the past 3 or 4 elections. So this is a wake-up call for the way in politics is being done in Colombia.
Laura, how do you think the results last night reflect on tendencies generally in the region?
Well, I think that we're seeing a continuation of many tendencies in the region. First of all, picking up on Angela's last point, the center has fallen out. we're seeing polarization in almost all of our countries. And we're seeing this desire for change that causes people to go to the left or to the right, but to abandon the center. That was the reason for Fajardo's poor showing. And also, in some ways, even though Fico is not on the center, he's clearly identified with the right. It was the reason for that as well. People are looking for a change, and they're looking to, I won't say extremes, because perhaps within what you could consider the mainstream of Colombian politics, they're looking at extremes, but they're basically expressions of currents that have existed for a long time within the political situation. So I think that's one of the clear lessons from this, a lesson that people in the United States learned with the Trump victory as well, even though he's defeated in a second election. And then another is there was a higher rate of participation. We're seeing more interest in the possibility of making change through the elections, because so much is at stake right now with the huge high levels of repression, with one of the highest rates of murders of defenders of land and territory, indigenous people, and opposition members. The human rights situation is abysmal in Colombia right now. And there's also a lot at stake in terms of the ideological paths that each side is proposing for the future. So there was a high degree of interest. It was still within the range of what it's been. It's a lower abstention rate than, according to the Mission of Electoral Observation, than they've seen since the 70s, which is saying something, but it's still, around 45%, which is kind of common in a lot of our countries for elections in countries throughout the world. So that means that there is a potential block there of people that could be mobilized to take part in a runoff who didn't take part in this first election and who could change some part of the equation. But it's not very clear that they're going to all go running in one direction, or even that they're going to go running out to the polls in a runoff election, because that rate of abstentionism, like I say, has been kind of constant throughout the time.
So, Gustavo, what do you think Colombian people do want? I mean, they're clearly asking for change. What does that change look like? And what do you think the two remaining candidates in the second round will have to say or do to reach that 40% or so that may be not participating or are prepared to swing their vote?
No, but it was interesting also yesterday that Gustavo Petro won, but won only for 40%. And he was expecting to win around 45% at least, because now the situation is really complicated for him, because the Fico Gutierrez was the right-wing candidate, but Rodolfo Hernandez could not be considered a far right. I mean, this guy is from center, is populist. We know he's populist, but the ideas are more like anti-corruption, reivindication of the people work. And really, I mean, he touched the feelings and the desires of common people. He have made a really good campaign. He has spent a few money. He is not going to public debates anymore. And this guy have a really, really original campaign, and he have an advantage. He obtained 28%, but most of the 23% of Fico Gutierrez, 24% of Fico Gutierrez, he probably is going to vote for Rodolfo Hernandez. If we think that things are going to if things are not going to change, I mean, we can expect change in the next 3 weeks. But if the election were the second round were today, for sure, Rodolfo Hernandez have an advantage. So we have a new situation now. a situation in which an outsider may win the election, and we can see now in the new discourse of Gustavo Petro, because he has a discourse against Uribe, against the right, but now he has to change the discourse to punish the opinions again, to punish the favorability of Rodolfo Hernandez. And okay, he has to appeal to the lack of experience, the poor preparation, even corruption, because there are accusations of corruption against Rodolfo Hernandez. So this is a situation now. And now is this is the struggle between two populist projects in Colombia, because Gustavo Petro is also a populist. If we take a look of his opinion, he has said that he's not going to respect the decision of the Congress. He's going to appeal to the people if the Congress do not approve their reforms. So we are seeing now a struggle between two populist projects, and it's not the second round that we can have a sure winner. Any of the two can win now.
Okay, but it looks like Rodolfo Hernandez has momentum and has more options. Yep. So, Angela, yep. What do you think that Gustavo Petro will be doing in the next 3 weeks to try and shore up more support and mop up any potential votes that he can swing his way? Who will he be talking to? What kind of alliances? What kind of messages will he be putting out to apathetic voters to try and get over the 50% line?
I think that's the big question, because he has already run out of all the arguments and all of the lines that he has been using in the past, and now somehow are backfiring against him, because now there's someone with a line about corruption, for example, that somehow people feels that embodies this idea better. But we also have the thing against Uribe. And now there's someone who doesn't seem so radical, that has not been affiliated with guerrillas, for example, which is something that really has a weight here in Colombia. There's people that no matter what are never going to vote for someone that has been part of the guerrilla. And that's a mindset for a lot of Colombians. So now they have someone that goes against that. And Rodolfo has been putting in place a strategy that has been somehow mild and conservative, at least in the social media, but that at the end has been really successful for him. And he has shown on how he has grown. The number of votes for him have grown in the past 2 weeks or something. So the election only has 3 remaining weeks. So I'm guessing that what Gustavo Petro is trying to figure out now, it's like, what type of change is he going to represent? And if it would have been for me, and my advice for him would to focus on the protection of the rights, because Rodolfo Hernandez has shown on his public appearances that he is not really interested in protecting minorities' rights, or even, for example, women's rights, migrant rights, those type of things, Afro-Colombian rights, indigenous rights. And that's something that the campaign of Gustavo Petro does. He has a really relevant vice president. He has an important number of consultants and members of the Congress that support those rights. So for me, he should be focusing on that. But I really think that it's hard for him to outgrow the number of votes that he already has, because if in simple math, if we sum up the votes that Rodolfo already had plus the ones that come from Federico Gutierrez, it's going to be a lot more than Gustavo Petro has.
Okay, thanks, Laura. What's your impression of the main differences between Gustavo Petro and Rodolfo Hernandez going into the second round? What options are they offering Colombians, or what is the daylight between them?
There's quite a bit. In fact, it's enormous, and Colombia is in a very dangerous position right now, because I totally disagree that Rodolfo Hernandez is a centrist, kind of a mild or candidate that somehow represents just an anti-corruption campaign. Rodolfo Hernandez is a 77-year-old multimillionaire who has headed up this anti-corruption campaign despite being accused of acts of corruption, including housing units that were never delivered. He has expressed his admiration for both Adolf Hitler and for Uribe on different occasions. He firmly believes and has expressed multiple times that women should not be in politics, that women should be in the household, although he has, for political opportunistic reasons, chosen a vice presidential candidate who is a woman. He has an extremely conservative social agenda, and he has an extremely high temper. He attacked an opposition member famously on video and has a number of rants that are circulating on social media. He's run a Trump campaign. There's a lot of analogies, again, to Donald Trump. He has avoided direct confrontation because he really doesn't have a platform. You can't say, well, this is what one believes on this issue and this is what the other believes. Petro has a defined platform, whether you agree with it or not. Rodolfo Hernandez now has 3 weeks to catch up in this department of saying something more than I'm not what was there before, and I'm running on an anti-corruption campaign and getting rid of the old political class. He has to say something more. I mean, this is a society that faces very concrete challenges at this moment, and people need to know, where a front-running or a prominent candidate in the runoff is positioned on these issues. I think. To be able to move out of where Colombia is right now, with the repression, with the vast inequalities, with the protests that will continue no matter what happens, because much of Colombia's real democratic strength lies in the social movements. And they understand that voting can be important at this moment to avoid moving further toward a repressive right-wing government, but they're going to continue with autonomous demands as well. And they need a leadership that is able to dialogue, that is able to understand that. So you have two candidates who are calling themselves the change candidates, and one of them is firmly a part of the old economic elite, the businessman from Bucaramanga, and very closely allied to the political elite, the right-wing political elite as well. When we say, or some people say, and I would disagree with this, that Uribismo is dead, that this vote is a proof of that. Yes, as such, its force has been diminishing. The voters did reject it at the polls, in a sense. However, the capacity of Uribe and his current to govern under Rodolfo Hernandez government is real. We could easily see a reconfiguration. That means that essentially we've got a reconfiguration of the right and almost even a proxy government that represents exactly the kind of continuation that he's trying to present himself as being against. So it's a very complex situation. And I think that we're going to have to watch it very closely. There are a number of global factors as well. We have to see what the United States is doing. The international press is, again, presenting Rodolfo Hernandez as the third way, as like somehow this less extremist than the other two. I reject totally the word populist because I don't think it means much. Populism is basically saying what the people want to hear, but in some ways representing the people is actually a democracy. And so I don't think that it's very helpful either on the right or the left. We have to look at what their concrete positions are and what kind of powers and intentions they're hiding as well. Because Colombia is a country where not everything is open to the eye. We're seeing hard powers behind the scenes, from the paramilitary organizations that continue to exist and continue to act, to private sector interests that hired private snipers, against demonstrations and protests. In the last couple of years, there's a whole range and one of powers behind the scenes, and one of those is also the U.S. government. We'll be watching very closely what the State Department does. Joe Biden is very close to Colombia. He still presents it, despite all the evidence to the contrary, as a success in the war on drugs, and still considers it a linchpin for U.S. power within the region. So those are all some of the powers that are in play that will be lining up in this very short 3-week period until the runoff election.
Okay, thank you for that, Laura. Gustavo, if you were an advisor to Gustavo, the other Gustavo Petro, what would you be saying to him? What advice would you be giving him to neutralize, what Laura is presenting as a wolf in sheep's clothing? What would you be saying to Gustavo Petro today? What should he be focusing on the next 3 weeks?
Said something previously. I mean, I do think that both Gustavo Petro and Raul Fernandez are populists. If we understand populists as the idea of creating a community of people, and the idea of the leader representing that people, and the idea that this leader represents these people and is able to break the institution, the democratic institution, both are populists. Both Raul Fernandez and Gustavo Petro, they think they can go through the institution and create a new order on the idea that they represent the true interests and the true demands and the true feeling of the people. Both are populists. And I do not think that Raul Fernandez is part of the economic elite. Raul Fernandez is a new rich, by the way. And he does not belong to the really big rich of Colombia. The really big of Colombia are Luis Carlos Sarmiento, Santo Domingo. These are really rich. This is a new rich that had made themselves with real estate business. And so it's a different character we have here. And not, I do not like Rodolfo, I do not like Petro, but the political situation is a really original in Colombian history. The problem that Gustavo Petro have now is that he made an anti-Uribe campaign. And now he is going to find that Rodolfo Fernandez was against Uribe because Uribe was part of the FICO campaign. By the way, now the discourse of Gustavo Petro is the discourse of Rodolfo Fernandez is that I do not represent Uribe. He knows very well that Gustavo Petro is going to going to create the idea that Rodolfo Fernandez is part of the Uribe's campaign. So my advice to Petro is of course, create the idea that Rodolfo Fernandez is part of the Uribe's campaign. And also create the idea that Rodolfo Fernandez represents the establishment and the traditional politics of Colombia. Also, there is a you have said about the rights, and it's true. The discourse of Rodolfo Fernandez is not protecting the rights of minority, of women. He doesn't have a discourse of that. But we can be having here a discourse against that rights. We cannot consider Rodolfo Fernandez Bolsonaro or a Trump. This is a different character. And their success has been explained because of that, because he's hyper pragmatic. And this is the secret of Rodolfo Fernandez. He's not going to fight for idea. He's going to fight for for finding a perfect solution, avoiding any problem of the current democratic institution. So he's going to make things simple, get solutions, successful solution, and that is the secret of Rodolfo Fernandez. And this is the problem with Gustavo Petro, because Gustavo Petro have against him all this idea that he represents Venezuela, Chavez, Maduro, all of this idea of socialism of 21st century. And Rodolfo Hernández doesn't have that. In fact, the problem for Gustavo Petro now is that he's not going to compete against an Uribe's candidate. He's going to compete against a new kind of candidate. So that's the reason he has to change the discourse, and he has to make and create a new enemy to win elections. And he can make it if I can create this new character. Otherwise, he apparently is going to lose, as we already said.
Okay, thank you very much for that. So we've basically run out of time, but just before we finish, I'd really like you guys to give us your predictions for the second round. What do you think? What will be the percentages? Starting with you, Angela.
I think it's really early, and the situation has been so shocking, actually, that it's really. I don't want to put myself out there with a bad prediction, but I think that I think Rodolfo is going to keep growing, unfortunately, and I say that accompanied by the comment that I did before on the protection of minorities and rights, because as Gustavo was mentioning, he's representing a type of Colombian that has been out of the politics, like in practice. He embodies the idea of people that can become millionaire if you work. He embodies the idea that migrants, the only type of migrants that come to Colombia are prostitutes or robbers. That men can do things better than women, specifically on the public agenda. And I think all of those things, I mean, he has even hit one of his colleagues in the face in public and being proud of it. So I think that's something that people really somehow appreciate and can relate now in Colombia, because politics have been done in the past really far away from that, from them, actually, like from political icons that have been there all their life, not the regular citizen. And the regular citizen has the idea to become a billionaire and hit in the face their enemies. So my only prediction, and I really hope that I'm making a mistake here, is that it's very probable that Rodolfo Hernández can get more votes in the future.
Okay, Laura, what do you think?
Just briefly, I'm not going to hazard a guess either, because I usually don't, go for odds making. But I think that it's clear that he's going to rise, because now the right is going to unite against him, despite any differences they may have had in the past, just to block the left. And whether that's enough will depend on a lot of factors. I think one thing that we can expect, and I fear this, is a campaign of fear. A campaign of fear against Gustavo Petro. We've seen it in the past. That's not based on issues or who offers what path for the country, but touching on people's insecurities, on people's people want change, but they're afraid of instability. It's also hard to generalize. I'm not going to say the people this or the people that either. There's a lot of different currents, and when you look at the diversity of the society, it's extremely profound. And a lot of times too, when we talk about the people, we're talking about urban white people who take polls, and yet we've got these very powerful movements of indigenous people who have a very different vision for the future of the country. So I don't know, what's going to happen. I think it's really important to just make sure our role as commentators or as people who are in solidarity with the democratic aspirations of the Colombian people is to keep an eye on the situation and to be there if there's a need to support against acts of violence or dangerous tendencies or anti-democratic acts within this period.
Absolutely, well said. And finally, Gustavo, any predictions for us?
Fernandez appears to win, but I am really pessimistic. I mean, I'm really sad. Colombia is going to have a populist government. I mean, in the next 4 years, at least we are going to have a populist government. These two guys are threatening democratic institutions. And this is not only the failure of the political class to interpret the content, also the failure of democratic force to make a change following following democratic institutions. So the big loser yesterday were not only the political class, but also the democratic project of change.
Okay, well, on that note, I think we have to leave it here. Thank you very, very much, Angela, Laura, and Gustavo, for joining us tonight and giving people outside the country who maybe don't speak Spanish or can't read the Spanish language press a more in-depth insight into what happened last night and what's coming in the next few weeks and months and years. So thank you very much indeed for joining us tonight.
Right.
Thanks for the invitation.
Thanks.